Welcome to the Challenges of Change, the podcast where we explore the transformative journey towards self-improvement and personal growth. I'm your host, Laura, a mindset coach in the health and fitness industry, here to guide you through the hurdles that life throws at you. In each episode, we'll delve into practical strategies and insightful discussions to help you manage stress, regulate your emotions, upgrade your mindset, and ultimately reclaim your sense of worth. I'm thrilled to have you join me on this journey of change, challenges, and self-discovery. And we're back for another episode of the Challenges of Change. And today's episode goes out to the givers, the ones who love to help, who loves to show up for everyone else, but sometimes might struggle to accept help themselves or ask for help or receive in general. How do you know if this is you? Well, simple. If someone gives you a compliment, can you accept it? Now, I don't mean just verbally accept it as like, oh, thank you. I mean, like, can you take it into your soul and believe it? Or do you feel like you need to compliment them back or give something in return? Because being giving is beautiful, but it comes with its shortcomings if we aren't conscious of it and we aren't mindful, because at its core, when you can't receive, it's actually a defensive quality, a protective mechanism that likely developed during childhood, but we don't really see what it robs us of. It reminds me of the book, The Giving Tree. For those who haven't read it, simple sentiment. A young boy keeps going to a tree asking for its resources to help it live a fulfilling life until the tree is simply a stump and has nothing left to give to the boy, who is now an old man. And the old man says, don't worry, I just need somewhere to sit. And this stump is like, well, you can sit on me. Simple plot line, right? And I get it in general. Like, we do need people who give more. But this is specific for the givers, not the takers, but the people who overgive and struggle to receive. Because you're robbing yourself. Because what happens when you struggle to receive is there's an imbalance in the relationship. But more importantly, it causes this unique, painful type of loneliness where no matter how much you give, it'll never be enough because you're only trying to experience love from a space of strength, not vulnerability. Because the truth is, we avoid receiving because it's vulnerable. When we're giving to someone, we have something and we're giving it to them. We have resources, we have capacity, we have humor, whatever we might be giving. It comes from a place of strength, of capability. But when we have to receive, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're coming from a space of incapable or a lack of resources. Yet that is how many people experience it. And then there's a whole different breed of human who views giving and receiving as transactional, which is not how relationships are. If someone gives you a compliment, that does not mean you need to give them one back. If there is an organic and authentic compliment that meets your heart in the moment, for sure, definitely be friendly and like do that. But if you're doing it to offset the discomfort you're experiencing because you're uncomfortable receiving the spotlight or a compliment, that's telling you something's up within you. Because ultimately, when we learn to give, we unconsciously and unintentionally also reject other people's love. We tell them, not like verbally or like specifically, but when someone says, oh, you look so great today, and you're like, oh, no, I don't. I barely spent a minute putting myself together. You're dismissing their compliment. And on the surface, it's not that big of a deal. But when that becomes a pattern, especially in, partnership type relationships or long friendships, it doesn't foster connection. I'll tell you that much. It actually pushes people further away. So your ability to receive or not receive directly affects your experience of love, your experience of loneliness, and unconsciously rejects other people's loves. Now, as a giver, I don't believe that's what you are trying to do. I wasn't, but it wasn't until I felt the vulnerability of receiving, felt how whole I felt, and really understood like what heart-centered love and receiving felt like, not just knew. Like there's a difference between being able to intellectualize it versus like feel it. And it has moved me to tears on more than one occasion. And it's important that we allow that for resilience. We are really good at pushing ourselves away from the things we don't like in life. We are really good at trying to avoid things and trying to protect ourselves. But what we don't recognize is when we allow the good in, not just the joyous moment, but the loving moments that require vulnerability, we build capacity in our nervous system to be able to persevere through challenges. So, why do people struggle with receiving? Sure, it's vulnerable, and you might experience something, maybe you would term it as weakness. I don't really terminology. I don't like the term that is weakness, but it feels like exposure is what it is. Well, for a lot of people, it feels like a loss of control. And if you have used control to try and help yourself navigate the world successfully as an adult, the idea of losing control can be threatening. Makes sense, right? But it can also interfere with how you perceive yourself. So, what your identity is. A lot of times we experience our identity as we're afraid of how other people might think of us, but really that's just a projection of how we're thinking of ourselves. So it creates this experience where we feel triggered or like we fear that we're going to be indebted or less than to this other person who's just giving us a compliment. So it's not true, yet it speaks to our individual limitations because we need to have control or we need to be viewed as insert words there. But at the end of the day, the only thing that you're doing is robbing yourself of feeling loved and rejecting the other person's love. And if you're in a partnership and you continue to reject someone's love, why would they keep trying to give you love? So if you're feeling lonely, yet you're in a relationship, food for thought. Yes, there's a early conditioning and the childhood dynamics that play a big role. For instance, if love and support came with strings attached, which for a lot of us it did, people will learn to equate receiving with eventual punishment, rejection, or obligation. So if you heard things like, you don't need that, or don't be greedy, or you're too much, that may grow into an adult who feels guilty accepting kindness because they are waiting for the other shoe to drop, which is the other side of receiving it. And then there's the big, big one, which is our self-worth and feeling like we deserve that. Our culture often glorifies self-sufficiency. And I understand it in concept, but in lived experience, it very much goes against what it means to be human because we internalize this message to be like, we don't need or we can't accept any flaws. Like we have to be perfect, which is impossible. And like, what does it even mean to be a perfect human? That's just, no one can define that. I still can't define that because it changes and every human will say a different iteration of what it means to be perfect. All of it is just a shield to avoid our emotions. Once again, we're back to avoiding emotions. But what does it actually cost you? So, okay, that's why, right? We don't like feeling vulnerable. We want to be perfect. We want to feel worthy and deserving. We want control. We want to have a sense of agency over our identity. But what do we actually lose when we do this? Well, it erodes intimacy because if you can't be vulnerable with yourself or your partner, which is required to receive, you can't be intimate, not truly. You can have, physically intimate experiences, but not emotionally heartfelt, intimate like experiences. And that's the difference between the intellectual versus the heartfelt. It very much leads to burnout and resentment because over time you're using the same path of giving, 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 hoping that then you'll feel full and appreciated, but ultimately you can't receive any of their appreciation. So you're just going to feel resentment and burnout. And it is this really toxic cycle that perpetuates a lack of worthiness, where we literally only go through the world, not consciously, mind you, but unconsciously seeing how we're unworthy because we are unable to accept or receive people's kindness. And in turn, that just pushes us further and further away, making us feel isolated. It really breeds a ton of loneliness. Now, I understand that it can be vulnerable and I understand all the reasons why we do it. And yet, I'm going to ask you to try it because I feel like what the giving tree lacked was the importance of receiving in relationships. And I'm going to share two specific stories. One just happened this past weekend that surprised me with how emotional I felt receiving the art, love, purpose that these two chefs put into their experience. So, friends and I went to this private dining experience where these two chefs invite you to their home, and every detail is part of the game that you don't even know it's part of the game. We walked in, and there's this beautiful kind of like constellation. They have these things hanging from the ceiling with a projector projecting light on them, so it kind of looks like this art constellation on the wall. And they have all these things going up to the stairwell. And it was in this renovated church, so like the windows are beautiful, if you can imagine. And then they create a very specific menu for you and your party for that night. But the whole reason why this was so meaningful was how they started it. They told us about their experience being chefs and how ultimately they ended up going out on their own and doing this kind of supper club because they wanted the stories that they associate with their food to come to life and for us to be able to receive it. They wanted to connect with the people that they were feeding and be in alignment with their purpose of why they cook. So every dish that they brought out, they explained what it represented to them and then what it was, and we got to enjoy it. And then they take it a whole different step further. So like their food is outstanding. And I'm not even a huge foodie. And like, bam, it was just all in your face deliciousness. But they go even further, where each group of people get this, they get 10 pictures for their Polaroid, and they ask you to tape some Polaroids into their kind of old leather-bound book journal style thing and write a couple notes about your experience. And when they're done with their night, done with the dishes, cleaning up, etc., they look through and see the meaning and impact that they created in that. And in a world that is so focused on hustle and bustle and producing and optimizing and greed, this was the most heart-centered experience, purpose-driven experience that I think I've ever had. So much so when I went to compliment the chefs about not just their food, but the entirety of the experience, I started to cry because I truly felt like I received their message, their passion, their heart in what they said. And I haven't experienced anything like that with food. Yes, I like food. Who doesn't, right? But it was the chefs and their stories and the subtleties and the experience and the hidden little gems along the way. I mean, you just couldn't see it coming. And even trying to describe it to people, I feel like is a mute point because until you experience it, you really can't understand it. But when you experience something and the giver is heartfelt, purpose driven, in alignment, and you can receive it, it creates such a beautiful experience that words can't capture. A younger version of me would have not cried, would have been like, okay, the food's good, but like, I don't get it. And I'm so grateful that I didn't have that experience, that I'm who I am today and was able to actually receive what they were trying to give because they were putting their heart and soul into the food and they deserve me to feel that way. They deserve my tears, as silly as it is to cry over food. They deserved it. And I am eternally grateful and cannot wait to go back to the supper club because of how impactful it was. But I'll give you another one. When I first got involved with Dawning Family Services, I don't like asking people for money. There's so many people in my life who have been so generous to me throughout the entirety of my life. The very idea of asking them for more made me feel bad. Like I felt like I needed to find like a new pot of people to ask for support. But I really believed in the mission that Dawning was, fundraising. And I asked my people, as uncomfortable as it was, I wanted to help the people who were, homeless and didn't have the village I had. And I set a $500 fundraising goal, and I made over $5,000. And the people who donated $10, 1,000, whatever it was, I can't even tell you the number of times I cried. Apparently, I cry when I receive because of how heartfelt and full I feel is something I'm learning. But I've literally never felt more loved than having the people in my life believe in me, believe in a cause enough to be willing to donate some of their hard-earned money to something that is meaningful to me. So receiving comes in so many different lights, whether it's receiving a compliment from a stranger, going to a dining experience, asking for help for something you believe in, or just being kind to yourself. That's even its own form of receiving. It is where the fullness of life exists. If you are feeling lonely, if you are feeling underappreciated, I dare you to see if you can actually receive what people try and give you. When people are being loving towards you, can you accept it? Can you take it in, even if it makes you feel vulnerable? Because if not, that's exactly what you need to attack in order to feel full. I know that this topic can feel mute. So I'm going to give you one more example. My husband, uh, he recently shared something with me how he didn't feel like I was supportive of him during a certain circumstance. And guys, if you listen to this, I love supporting people. And he is probably my very favorite person to support since, love him and all. Um, and he told me that I didn't feel supported. And I got frustrated because I remember telling him I felt like something was up, but he said nothing was. So I was like, okay, can't force him to realize something's under his skin. I asked him a handful of different times how I like what he needed, how I could help him. I over communicated, and he was just being sharp and short with me, and it just was the state for the day. And then a few days later, after his therapy, he told me that he didn't feel supported. And a few days later after that, I addressed it with him. And ultimately, what came to light is at the time, he didn't feel safe enough to receive my support. He was so trapped in some of his old patterns that he couldn't even let me be there for him. Now, one thing I know about my husband is he never wants to hurt me, just like I never want to hurt him. Do we ultimately hurt each other? Sure, because that's love and that's relationships and that's just how it works. I've had to learn how to receive, and now that is part of what he's working on because he hurt my feelings, telling me that he didn't feel supportive, and we ultimately had to talk about it to upgrade the narrative of what transpired so we could be aligned because he knows that I'm supportive and that I want to be supportive. And I know that he never wants to hurt me. And yet, because of our patterns and where he is in his growth and where I am in my growth, we still stumbled into it. So it really does influence so many aspects of your life from feeling valued at work to feeling valued in relationships to valuing yourself. So whether it's you or another giver please pass this along and allow yourself to feel whole because you deserve it. And no one can fight for that but you. Until next time. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of The Challenges of Change. If you're ready to stop stressing and reclaim your sense of worth, be sure to visit my website at www.changebychallenge.com. There, you'll find loads of resources, blog posts, and information on how to work with me, Laura, as your personal mindset coach. Remember, if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. Don't let burnout or any other obstacle hold you back from living your best life. Take the first steps towards positive transformation today. Thank you again for listening. Stay confident, stay inspired, and embrace the challenges of change. Until next time.